Hey there, welcome back to my channel. In this Docker tutorial, we will be Dockerizing a Spring Boot microservices application. I am going to consider a use case of building our Spring Boot application. We will going to test it out. That is step one. Then we are going to create a Dockerfile, and Dockerfile is the requirement to build a Docker image. So inside the Dockerfile, we will talk about the multi-stage build concepts around that. Then we are going to build our Docker image using the Dockerfile. As a final step, we are going to create containers from that Docker image, and we are going to test it out. So this is the overall scope of what is packed inside this video. Without any further ado, let us jump in and try to understand the Hello World Spring Boot application first. So I created a Hello World Spring Boot microservices application project. The project name is multi-stage demo. And how I managed to create it, let me just explain it. It's just pretty simple. Just head down to the Spring initializer, start.spring.io, and just feed all the details, which language, which project, Spring Boot. So in our case, we are going to use Maven, and we are going to use the Java here. So I use 3.3.4. We have to feed in all these details, and once we feed in these details, and we got to add the dependencies. Just hold on for a second. So we just need to add the dependencies here. So let's say whatever dependencies we want, we can just add it. So I think I just added the Spring Web. It's already there. So with this, just click on generate. It is going to download the jar file, and once we have the jar file, go back to Eclipse, import the jar file, and you should have all the artifacts except the Hello World controller. I just added the Hello World controller and had a service which says when a request comes, say hello, it's going to return back the string. Pretty simple. And I will be having these project artifacts checked into GitHub, and will share the link in the description. Okay, so let us actually test this out. So go back, it's already started. So go back to the browser and localhost 8080, and we want to hit the service say hello. So once we do that, we get this message back. So pretty awesome. So now we are done with the first phase, where we will have to we have to create a Hello World Spring Boot application, right? We are done with that. So as a next step, we will be looking into the Docker file creation. A Docker file is a prereq for building any Docker image. And normally we will have all the instructions crammed into a single Docker file. And when everything is included in a Docker file which doesn't follow a multi-stage build, the Docker image that is actually built is of a humongous size. And moreover, since we are including some of the components which are not really required for the functioning of the containers, we are ineffectively increasing the attack surface of those containers. So there are some security implications because of this. So when we follow a multi-stage build process, we can in essence reduce the image size, and we can have the containers more secure. Okay, so with this understanding, let us jump in and let us see in each stage what happens. So the first stage is where we will be building our application. Okay, so the jar file is built within the scope of the first Docker image build. This is more like a staging. Okay, so we have given the stage as a builder phase. If you don't give it, it takes numerical values. Okay, so the good practice is we'll have to name it appropriately, whatever we want to do. So in this case, we are building our application, we have the name as builder. So the next set of instruction is the workdir, where we want to set any copy and any run command will work with regards to the work dir. If you don't specify the work dir, we will have to set a copy and run the destination appropriately. If you set the work dir, you can say it relatively. That makes our life more easier. So we set the work dir to opt app, and we will have to copy all the necessary components that are required for the functioning of Maven. In our case, we are copying the .mvn folder. We are copying the mvnw script, which is which does the job of downloading the jar files using the pom.xml, downloading the plugins based on the pom.xml, and finally it is going to compile, build, and create a application jar file. Okay, so all these things is what I have talked now. So this downloads the dependencies, this copies the source to the destination from our local, and finally this piece of code actually it builds the application jar file. So when this is done, we are done with stage 0. We're going into the next stage. Next stage is where we are building our final image. So our final image, we want to have the base image as Eclipse Temuran, but instead of JDK, we are going with JRE. So we'll have to specify what is a work dir. Similarly, we are going to expose port 8080. You can change it, and we want to copy the application jar file that was built in the previous staging image to the final image. So this is what it does it. Then finally, whenever the container is up and running, this piece of instruction makes sure that the Spring Boot is up and running. This microservices is up and running to take any kind of request. So pretty much this is what the Dockerfile does. And next phase, or the next step, is where we will be building our Docker image using this Dockerfile. Good. Now we're going to build our Docker image based on the Dockerfile that we created. So let us use the Docker build command. We're going to build our Docker image, let's say hello Java, and it is going to use the Dockerfile that is in the current directory. Okay, so I'm just going to execute it. It is going to create the final Docker image. I'm going to pause this video for a few seconds. So now we have our final Docker image built. How do we check that? We'll have to use the Docker images command, and we see the hello Java created in our local registry. So let us try to create a container. So we're going to use docker run command, and we're going to name the container as C1, and we want to publish this to the outside world. So how do we do that? So any request that is coming onto the host in port 8085 gets translated to port 8080 onto the service running inside the container. You could have any port number, 8085 or 86 or 87, depending on whether it is already bound or not. So 8085 is fresh, I'm using it. So -d, run it in a detached mode, and we'll have to say that hello Java is my image, out of which the container will be created. So now how do we know that the container is already there? So when we issue docker ps, it's going to list down all the active containers. So it is currently listening on port 8080 mapped to 8085. So let me just open a browser and let me just quickly test this out. So http localhost 8085, and I'm going to say hello. So now we have the hello world service sending this response back. This request has hit the container through the Docker host on 8085. It has hit the container, and this is the final response. Mission accomplished. Awesome. So now, as part of this Docker tutorial, we have looked at creating our Spring Boot application, Dockerizing that Spring Boot application, and finally we created containers. We tested it out. Please try this at your home. If you have any questions, any suggestions, please put it in the text box below. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing to get more content like this. And let us catch up in the next video. Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye.